So today I'll be answering a common question, which is it possible for the traits of being an empath and narcissistic, for the two of those to coexist? And that's a really common question. So hopefully today will offer you that clarity. Now, to start off, I just want to break down the traits of the empath and narcissistic behavior. Empaths are usually empaths for various reasons. Now sometimes people are born with the trait, and sometimes it's developed, usually within childhood. So some people are born with the temperament, and that's very obvious when they're born and they come out the womb, and you can tell that they're very sensitive to their environment, to the light, to the temperature, to the sounds. So some people are born with this temperament. Then there are people who inherit it in their genetics. So that's where it gets passed on from one generation to the other, where one of the parents might be highly sensitive, or both, or someone in the family is highly sensitive and the traits get passed on to the next generation. Then the third thing is, this is where there are some people who are not necessarily born with a highly sensitive trait, but develop it. And that's very common when it comes to experiencing trauma. So when a child experiences trauma, they will naturally activate their nervous system to try and protect themselves. So that can create a slightly weaker defense system. It can wear down the defense system, because you would do that in order to protect yourself. So it causes the nervous system to go on hyper alert as a way of protecting yourself from danger. So this would be applicable for people who would have been through trauma, whether it be abusive parenting, maybe one of the parents were addicts, or maybe depressive or narcissistic. So when anyone experiences emotional trauma or physical trauma or abuse, then it's quite common for the highly sensitive trait to be developed as a consequence to that trauma. So as a result to that, what happens is that the child doesn't end up feeling seen by the parents, by the family. And when a child doesn't feel seen, as a consequence, as they grow older, they don't end up feeling seen by their surrounding community. I have a question: can it be trauma from adulthood? That's possible too, yes, or adolescence even. It is possible. It tends to be when you've been in a traumatic surrounding for a long period of time, and with the child's brain, it's still being developed, so it's more likely to be in childhood. So the important thing to remember is that healing is possible. If you are a highly sensitive person, an empath who has developed the trait from trauma, then it's important to know that healing is indeed possible. And in doing so, it's important to feel safe in the environment that you're in order to enable your healing. Okay, now moving on to the narcissistic types of behavior. So far I've been covering the empath behavior. Now I'll be moving on to the narcissistic behavior, and just for the purpose of this live video, I just want to be clear that there are different types of narcissistic behavior, but for the purpose of this, I am not referring to the extremely violent sociopathic type of narcissistic personality disorder. I am talking about narcissistic behavior, which sometimes I'll come to this later, but about the merging of being an empath and narcissistic behavior. So first, so that we're clear on what does narcissistic behavior mean. Some of the most common traits are a sense of grandiosity, a sense of entitlement, a need for high admiration. They like to feel admired by people. They can be quite arrogant. They can lack a sense of empathy for other people. And they can be quite manipulative. And in being manipulative, they can gaslight you. So gaslighting are statements of manipulation, such as you're too sensitive, you don't have the right to feel the way you do, there's no reason why you should feel the way you do, I never did that, so denying what might have happened, what they might have done, or saying you're crazy, or that it wasn't that bad. Okay, so these are the various types of gaslighting that might be involved when it comes to narcissistic behavior. So then coming to my big point here to this video is, can a person have both traits? Can a person be an empath, have empathetic and highly sensitive traits, and also have narcissistic traits? And the answer to this is yes, that is possible. Now, again, I just want to remind you, I'm not referring to narcissistic personality disorder types where it turns into sociopathy or anything to that severeness, so that severe end of the spectrum, okay? But can the two traits coexist? Yes, it is possible. So what does that mean? So a person who has both traits will have the following tendencies, okay? They might feel more special and fundamentally different to other people. So there's a little bit of a sense of grandiosity when you feel like you're special because you have a gift and you feel above everyone else. So it feels like there's a sense of arrogance within that. Then there's a sense of inability to take responsibility for one's actions and feelings, which can turn into blaming other people, which is a very typical narcissistic trait, blaming other people. Then you might frequently become completely consumed in your own personal affairs and forget about other people, not concern yourself with other people's affairs. It can be a person who unnecessarily sacrifices themselves for others and ignoring their own needs in order to manipulate and control others. So they act as a person who is clearly sacrificing themselves to help other people, but only as a way of using it for manipulation and control. They might be people who are always feeling victimized by the world around them and feeling like everyone else's energy is attacking them. Or they might see people as being either angels or demons, so either, extreme, perceiving other people to be in extremes. Okay, and finally, these are only some traits, but just giving you the typical traits. So finally, the inability to understand what other people might be going through. So the inability to put themselves into other people's shoes when it comes to different people's beliefs or opinions, or even upbringings, if they don't have an understanding or are not open-minded enough to have an understanding of what other people might have been through, or even their mindset, if they can't open their mind to understand that different people have different mindsets. Okay, so these are some typical examples of the two coexisting between narcissistic behavior and the highly sensitive trait. Now, just to be clear, when it comes to the term empath, it doesn't necessarily always mean that a person is fully empathetic towards other people in the sense of being able to fully put themselves into other people's shoes all the time. Now, there's the types of empaths who is majority of empaths who are able to put themselves into other people's shoes most of the time, except for the times when we feel negative emotions like anger or resentment, or upset or overwhelm, okay? And that just means that we need to recharge ourselves and take care of ourselves so that we can recharge ourselves to be able to resurface that sense of empathy for other people. But then there's the type of empaths those who are closer towards who start to merge with the narcissistic kind of behavior, who don't really have the ability very much of the time to put themselves into other people's shoes, or develop and forgive and accept what other people might be going through, which is an important part of what empathy means. And so what I want to be clear on is, yes, it does exist. These two traits do coexist. However, it's also very possible to heal from it. Now, some people might have a more severe type of coexisting empath traits and narcissistic traits, and these people might have more severe diagnoses like borderline personality disorder, for example, which is a coexistence of the two traits where they can be extremely sensitive people, but it's more directed towards themselves. So that's where the two coexist. So they're not cold in the way that you would imagine a sociopath, but so they're very sensitive in that regard. And they're also very sensitive to their environment in the way that an HSP would be when it comes to noises and crowds and things like that. But at the same time, they possess a lot of the narcissistic traits. So when it comes to a diagnosis that's severe, if that is someone you know, or if it is you, then I would recommend treatment for that, psychiatry treatment for that. But the unfortunate truth is that a lot of people with this trait, because there are narcissistic aspects to this disorder, unfortunately a lot of people don't admit to wanting that kind of help, okay? So putting that aside, as long as it's not a disorder of that type, then let's put that aside and focus on the healing process. If both traits do coexist, then what does the healing process involve? And this is in the milder sense, okay? So first of all is self-awareness. The more aware you are of your behavior, the more you're able to address it, okay? Now it's again possible to have developed these traits over time in the way that you might have developed the highly sensitive traits from trauma. It could be that you might have inherited the narcissistic traits either from a previous generation, or being surrounded by them a lot, or even through traumatic experiences. So there are so many different reasons why a person might possess these traits, and for them to coexist. But the most important thing is self-awareness and being aware of those behaviors in order to be able to begin to address them and unpack them. Once you're aware of those behaviors, then you can start to unpack and peel off all of the layers to understand what's underneath it all. Whether that be feelings or thoughts or patterns that might have that you might have brought forward from your past, okay? So self-awareness, huge important point. And the other is self-love. Showering yourself with self-love and self-compassion is the only way to really allow yourself to move forward. Now, when I say self-love, this is not in an arrogant sense. This is in a sense of self-compassion, of allowing yourself, of accepting yourself enough to allow yourself to heal and move forward regardless of what might have happened in your past, whether it would have been from your own behavior or the behavior of others. Okay. So now I'll answer any questions. I noticed there were a few earlier, so I'll just scroll back. Can a healthy relationship happen with an empath daughter and narcissistic mum. Okay, when it comes to narcissistic people in general, whether they have the awareness of their trait or not, it's more likely than not that they won't be open to having any sort of sense of flexibility around it. And by flexibility, I mean, first of all, recognizing that what they're doing might not be healthy for other people around them. And secondly, very unlikely to get help, okay? Or to want to improve themselves. And that can be quite a toxic environment. And I'm not saying that that everyone should cut off anyone who, whether it's, usually within the family, to completely distance yourself 100%. For some, it might not be realistic, but either way, boundaries are the most important thing. And sometimes, if it is a parent, grieving what you did not have growing up is an important part of the process, because you would have been robbed from a healthy, balanced and nurturing childhood, and or even adulthood, because everyone needs a supportive parent in their life. And if you were robbed of that, then that is something to be grieved, okay? And it's unfortunate, and it's not fair. But all it means is, in the end, is that we have to end up parenting ourselves. And in parenting ourselves, it means setting ourselves the boundaries. It means that we can still give out love to that parent. It means that we can still give them send them the love and the affection in our own way, but by setting those limits for ourselves, without overgiving to the extent where we expect to get anything in return. Because if it is a narcissistic person, then you're not likely to get anything in return. Okay, so there's not a healthy exchange. It's not like in a healthy relationship. By relationship, I mean even between family members, where there's a healthy exchange of give and take. With narcissistic people, there isn't that balance. There isn't that exchange. So if it's not someone that you want to rule out of your life, then having that understanding and having those boundaries in place so that you don't sacrifice your own needs. Sometimes that means limiting time together. Sometimes that means understanding how to set your boundaries and where those limits are and how much energy you give out. Question: is narcissism consciously done? To be honest, first of all, it depends on the type of narcissism. If it's to an extreme, it's so difficult to get into those people's heads, and I don't really recommend doing so. Some might be aware of it, but they're not going to get help because they enjoy the power and the sense of entitlement. So sometimes it's just not even possible to know, to be honest. And I wouldn't advise trying to get into their heads either, because it won't benefit you. It's important to understand the traits so that you can use it to your ability to understand where you set your boundaries. So I recommend investigating it to that extent. But as to trying to understand whether they're aware of it or not, the point is that they're unlikely to get help for it, and that's all you really need to know about that, in my opinion. Is it healthy for us to have the sensitive trait forever, or should we be trying to eliminate it? Okay, so if you're a highly sensitive person, you will not be able to, or I don't recommend attempting eliminating it, okay? But you can learn to manage it. And in learning to manage it and ground yourself, that will naturally mean that things will naturally start to, your sensitivities will, in a way, will start to weaken in some senses, in a positive way, that you will feel more in control of your emotions and your reactivity. So when we are a highly sensitive person who have not learnt to manage our sensitivities, then we allow things in a lot more easily. So learning to manage your sensitivity means being able to shield yourself better in that way and learn to understand to deal with it better. So it's not eliminating it, but naturally you will notice that you'll develop more and more robust kind of ability to not allow certain things to get absorbed within you. Okay, so for the person earlier who was asking, can it be trauma for adulthood? So that's a question I answered earlier, where it can be, yes. Is it years? Yes, it tends to be years, especially in adulthood. The way that you can become more sensitive, but then it's the element of trauma as well, isn't it? It starts to wear down your kind of sensitive system within you. You start to react in ways to enable you to protect yourself. So yes, I do mean years. When I said a long time, I did mean years. How do you deal with energy that feels stuck in your body? Okay, the first thing I want to say before I actually directly answer that question is, the more you learn to manage your sensitivities, and what I mean by manage is the more you start to understand yourself in your self-awareness, to catch those thoughts and feelings before your mind and your body absorbs them. When you start to train your mind in that way and start mastering your mind in that way, then your body will not absorb it to the same degree. Okay? So if we're to address the root of the problem here that you're asking me about, I would recommend doing the deeper work rather than waiting for the energy to get absorbed into your body and for it to get stuck and then figure out what to do with it. So preventing that from happening would mean learning to manage it to begin with, so that your body does not absorb it in the first place, or as often as possible anyway. Okay? So if it is absorbed and stuck in your body, then self-care is the number one thing. And self-care might look different to every person. For me, self-care means dance, because I love dancing. I'm a dancer. I've done it for many years. It helps me release the energy in my body. Movement in general is very helpful to releasing those energies. And also it's very uplifting because it's a form of exercise. So moving your body in general will trigger the happy hormone. Okay, but releasing your body physically can be really helpful, and then forms of meditation as well, in order to calm your mind and reground yourself into the earth and feel your body connect into the earth. So those are the two main things that I would recommend. Does anybody else have any questions? You're welcome. I hope that helped. Okay, great. Well, if anyone else has questions, please drop me a message. But yes, in general, addressing the root of the problem is definitely what I would recommend doing, and this is why I recommend coaching, and this is why I've become a life coach, because I know what it is to unpack all of these things and understand what it is that's the root cause of what's preventing you from being able to manage your sensitivities better, and of course overcoming the things that might have happened in order and allowing you to move forward in the direction of where you really want to be in your life, which is being able to manage your sensitivities better and to overall feel more resilient and powerful and strong within yourself, and more grounded within yourself, so that you can live your your life to the most authentic self that you can possibly be. Question: is there a difference between no contact and the silent treatment? Would you like to elaborate on the reason for this question? So no contact might be a form of boundary. So it might be a boundary that you're setting of not being in any form of contact with a person because they might be toxic to you. And the silent treatment is a passive aggressive reaction. So as an empath, if you're in a toxic relationship with a narcissistic person, you might want to, as an example, okay, you might want to go no contact in order to set yourself those boundaries and protect your energy. And then on the other side of that, a narcissistic person might give you the silent treatment as a way of trying to teach you a lesson, which is very passive aggressive behavior and manipulative behavior. Okay, I hope that helps. I want no contact with my ex, but am I giving her the silent treatment? Sometimes if the message was never clear as to why you're doing it, if you feel that it's important to say, I am, the reasons why you're doing this is for X, Y, Z, and then going no contact, then that's good enough. But if the relationship was toxic anyway, then it sounds like not much would have come out of that anyway. So, okay, right. Silent treatment mainly when cohabitating. Yeah, silent treatment is a form of passive-aggressive behavior, and I wouldn't encourage that for anyone, whether you're an empath, a narcissist, or anything else under the sun. It's not something I would recommend, because I would recommend communication. But the unfortunate fact is that communication with narcissistic type people is not very possible, unfortunately. So, communicating in a healthy way is what develops healthy relationships. If that isn't possible, then it simply is something to accept. So setting that boundary might mean, exiting the room because the person is being too aggressive and too manipulative and too toxic towards you, and sometimes walking away from that is a healthy boundary, and that is not to be mistaken with silent treatment. It's just a healthy boundary. So I hope that clarifies the difference there. Okay, right. I wish you all a good rest of the day or evening wherever you are in the world. And again, drop me a message, and I do recommend talking to someone to start to unpack all of these things if this is something that you really want to work on, because you need to want it first. You need to want to improve it for yourself and to enable yourself to have a brighter future that you so deserve. Okay, you're all extremely deserving, and each and every one of you out there, I promise you. So please work on it if you have the ability to. Take care, everyone.